Hi everyone! Is this my second attempt at filming this video? Yes it is. My first attempt got all screwed up. So anyway, welcome back. My name is Becky. I like to read. Today I want to share with you 5 of my favorite romances that I read this year. Romance is my favorite genre and paranormal, contemporary, and fantasy are my favorite subgenres, but whenever I need like a pick-me-up or I'm in a reading slump or something like that, I always fall to romance. I unfortunately didn't read as much romance this year as I usually do, but I read enough to pick out 5 of my favorites. And some of these are part of series, so I'll only be sharing with you like the first book or my favorite book of that series. So the first romance I'm going to share with you is a reread for me this year, and that is Hawthorne and Heathcliff by R.K. Riles. This couple, Hawthorne and Heathcliff, they meet when they are seniors in high school, and they grow a friendship, and then it transforms into their relationship as they grow older and older. So about 70% of this book, which she's not a short romance, she's a little bit above average, I would classify that as a YA/NA romance, and then the other 30% I would classify as an adult romance. This is also a second chance romance, if that is one of your favorite tropes. They sort of drift away after they graduate high school, and then they find their way back to one another. And aside from the romance in this, it also deals with like familial relationships and grief within families, which made me sob like a baby twice now. This is a very sweet romance. There's not a lot of angst in it. There's also not a lot of smut in it. So if you like smutty, angsty romances, this might not be for you, but it is one of my favorite romances. The next series I want to share with you is called Legends of the Storm by Beck McMaster. I read this series back in January. It was part of a prompt for the readathon that I took part in for books set in Iceland, and it is about dragon shifters who live in Iceland and how they find their mates. It's a really well done, fantastical plot line as well, and it deals a lot with the familial bonds of this dragon horde, I guess. Only read, I think, 3 or 4 books in this series, and I want to continue. I just need to get myself in gear and get it done, but it was really great and I highly recommend it if you like dragon shifters. Next up is a pretty basic fantasy romance series, and that is ACOTAR. I read this series for the first time this year, and I've explained why in a past video, but I put off reading this series for the longest time because Fae just aren't my paranormal creatures of choice, and I didn't understand the appeal. But I finally caved and I gave in. Book 1, we're not going to talk about book 1. No, book 1 is a great setup for the rest of the series and it has some important details into it. But really, the romance is what we're here for, and the romance really kicked in book 2, and I absolutely loved Feyre and Rhysand's chemistry and their relationship and how they work together. I love the whole found family of the inner circle. I love the relationships between the side characters, who I hope end up getting books of their own further down this series. I'm just really glad that I finally caved and gave into this series, because now I am obsessed and I see the appeal. And you can just add me to the list of all the basic Beckys out there who love this series, because I really do. It's really great. The next series is one that I stumbled upon just randomly on Amazon, and it is called the Wildflowers and Evertrees series. There's only 2 books in this series so far, and I really need this author to put out the 3rd book because I really want to know what happens. This is the story of a woman who is half elf, half human, and when her territory succumbs to like drought, famine, and people are trying to kill her people, she reaches out to the neighboring territory's king, who she knew when she was growing up, for some help. And when she's there visiting his territory, she runs into the man who she had her first crush on. So book 1 is a lot more smuttier and a lot less plot-based, whereas book 2 is less smuttier and more plot-based. But I really love the chemistry between this couple. He is actually 10 years older than her, so if you like age gaps, it's got that. But he's much more chaste than her. He took a vow of celibacy, and so she is much more sexually experienced than he is. And he just doesn't think he's good enough for her because she is seen as like the queen of her territory, and he isn't. He's just who he is, and I don't want to say who he is because I want people to read this series. but I loved it. I loved the whole atmosphere that you get in book 2. You really get to see her world and her people and the magic that is interwoven into it and her powers that are developing. There's no love triangle, there's no cheating, there's no wishy-washy back and forth type thing. So I really enjoyed this series. It was a gem of a find. It did end on a freaking cliffhanger though, so I need book 3 ASAP. But I highly recommend, if you like fantasy romance, you check this series out. It did give me a little bit of ACOTAR vibes, so if you liked ACOTAR, you might check this series out. And what has to be my favorite romance of the year, and my new favorite romance series in general, is The Wraith Kings by Grace Draven. This is a friends to lovers romance, and friends to lovers is my favorite romance trope, so I was guaranteed to enjoy it. Ildiko is a human and Brishan is a Kai warrior. He's got gray skin and claws and eyes that glow like an owl. They're both down in the order of their lineage in their royal families, so they are put into an arranged marriage for advantageous reasons, and they really don't expect that their union will matter much until it does. Something happens in Brishan's kingdom and suddenly he becomes more important than he ever thought he would. They have such great chemistry, they have awesome communication, they are so mature, there's very little angst in here, and I love that. Books 1 and 2 do follow the same couple, and they are just so freaking good. Oh, I love this couple so freaking much. Book 3 follows side characters within this series, and even their relationship I freaking adore. I gave all 3 books so far 6 stars, and book 3, there was a scene in there that involved a hair ribbon that just, it made me cry, and I freaking loved it. So if you have not read this series and you like fantasy romance, I highly, highly recommend you check it out because it is so good. I've gotten people who don't even like romance to read this series and they loved it. But I cannot say enough. What the fuck? But I cannot say enough how much I love this series and how much I recommend it. So those were 5 of my favorite romances from the year. Let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these and what you thought about them, or if any of them sound good to you. So until my next video, thank you guys so much for watching, and read something great for me.